So I'm going to do a quick introduction. Debbie Duncan is a Director of Education Services with New Jersey Center for Nonprofits. She has over 40 years experience, as you can see here, and she joined the center in June of 2006. And she's responsible for educational programming, the annual conference, and developing and fostering access to a host of information as it relates to nonprofits and their stakeholders. Willie Tolbert is CEO and President of Business Resource Connector. And Willie also has a host of experience, as you can see here on the slide, with 30 years in insurance, financial services, employee benefits, business solutions. He has been on a board of directors of many nonprofits, and he now serves as president and, as I said, CEO of a business that helps small businesses grow and expand and getting the resources that many large businesses have access to and that other small businesses do not. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Debbie, and I will be monitoring Q&A. And at this point, Debbie, why don't you take it over?
Let me tell you just a little bit about the Center for Nonprofits. We are one of the main functions that we serve is to advocate for the nonprofit sector with your elected representatives, with policymakers. We educate the public and the nonprofits like you on the issues that are facing us. And we also do some research and have information for you and for the community to use in terms of to support your advocacy and your education programs. Education, like this webinar, we do professional training. We also have a help desk service that you can email us. That's the most efficient way. And we ask us questions about anything from HR to technology to board management, volunteer management. And if we don't have the answer, we'll direct you to the people who do. We also have some publications, and we have our annual nonprofit conference, which is the first Wednesday in December. This year, it's December 6th, so mark your calendars. We also are a membership organization. We serve everybody in New Jersey, all of the 501c3s, but our members get some extra benefits, some discounts, free job postings, some things like that. So it's worth looking into. The center is also, and this is important that everybody know, that we're a member of the National Council of Nonprofits. And if you leave New Jersey and go to another state, most likely there's another center just like ours or similar to ours that will be there to support you and provide you with information about that state. As Nancy said, I'm Debbie Duncan. I'm the Director of Education Services, and I'm really pleased to be able to bring this program to you. And I want to welcome Willie Tolbert, who, as Nancy introduced, but Willie and I go back many, many years. And so I'm really delighted to have Willie join me. He's had a lot of experience with nonprofits forming their organizations. What we're going to cover today is what is a nonprofit in New Jersey, research, planning, preparation, the state incorporation piece, and then the federal tax exempt application. I'm going to look a little bit at funding, just kind of to help get you started. You need to be thinking about this very early on. And then we'll look at some of the trends that are coming up here. But first, I want to start off by asking a few questions. Some of us have some misinformation, or we've heard things, or Uncle Joe said, or whatever, and there is a lot of confusion in quarters about nonprofits. I want to make sure that you can answer questions when people ask them of you. First of all, nonprofits in New Jersey, what's the median operating budget of a 501c3 nonprofit in New Jersey? And I'm giving you some ranges here. So it's under 25,000, 25,000 to 100,000, 100,000 to 1 million, or over 1 million. Now the median would be the center point in those operating budgets. Now most people tend to think it was fairly high. Everybody in this group has been pretty close to accurate because it's under $25,000. Over 55% of nonprofits are really small nonprofits, and most of them are volunteer led. As you can tell, with 25,000, you're not paying much in salaries. So keep in mind that that's the nature of the nonprofit community, are small organizations. Sure, there are big hospitals and there are big universities and other providers that are very, very large, but they're in the minority. So a few more questions here. Are charities allowed to charge fees for their services? Can charities have paid staff? Can charities carry a surplus from year to year? Do they have to empty out, spend every penny they've got every year? Can charities lobby for legislation? Okay, these are some tricky ones, and so I want to give you the accurate answers. Yes, charities can charge fees. Very often their fees don't reflect the total cost of a service that what you would have to pay if you went to a private provider, but they can charge fees, and that's an important part of their business model. Charities can have paid staff. I'm a paid staff person, and Willie has been one. So yes, we have staff. We can be employers. We have to follow the same regulations that employers have to follow as any other business. Can nonprofits carry a surplus from year to year? Now, this is often misunderstood. Some government grants, for example, or other grants will say you have to spend everything in this year, or we won't fund you, or if we fund you next year, we're going to lower it because obviously you don't need it. Okay. That is a terrible, terrible, terrible business model. You should have, it is recommended, and any accountant will tell you that you should have 6 months of operating expenses available to you if you need it. So you definitely do want to empty it out, because if you empty it out on December 31st, what are you going to do on May 7th when you have to meet payroll or you have to pay your rent or whatever it is? Can nonprofits lobby for legislation? Yes. And this comes down to the difference between advocacy and lobbying. Advocacy is educating. Advocacy is saying, here are issues that affect homelessness. Here is how we're fighting it. Here are some policies that make a difference in homelessness. Those things are all advocating. When I say Senator so-and-so has supported bill number S2437, I'm now talking about a specific bill, a specific action, and a specific legislator. Okay, that is lobbying. Now, I can do some of that as a nonprofit, as a charitable nonprofit, but it has to be less than about 25% of my resources. Now, that includes staff time, it includes donation, volunteer time, and it would include any kind of money that you spend on that. So we have a document on our website called Nonprofits Can Lobby. And you can go under publications and find that, and it goes into more details about this. But you can lobby, it's just that it's limited. A couple of other points I just want to bring up here is that nonprofits may have to have an internal audit, but only if their gross revenue is in excess of $1 million. So we've been lobbying for that for a couple of years. It finally went through last year. It used to be 750,000 because audits are very, very expensive for nonprofits. You do need to have fiscal reviews and fiscal controls. You may form an audit committee. You may bring in somebody from the outside to do a review, which is not as intensive as an audit. You definitely want to have those fiscal controls, but you don't have to pay an accounting firm to come in and do a heavy duty audit. unless your budget is over 1 million. The other thing is that if you need to be sure you're filing your annual reports. That means every year. Okay, if you don't file the annual reports, you have the risk of losing your nonprofit status. The New Jersey is after 2 years, consecutive years of not filing, and with the IRS after 3 consecutive years. So that's really, really important to know. These are obligations that you're taking on. The other big question, who owns a nonprofit? A lot of people, as a founder, as a creator, as a executive director, or as a board chair, really think that they have control over the nonprofit. But the answer is no one. Nobody owns a nonprofit. The board of trustees is entrusted with the stewardship of this organization, and they are the ones who are responsible and accountable for everything that goes on. So the executive director is, if hired, okay, or if a volunteer, doesn't matter, responds to the board of trustees, and it is the board of trustees who make decisions. So it's important to understand that a nonprofit is a public trust. It's not a business. There is no owner. So what is a nonprofit in New Jersey? Well, let me clarify 2 things here. There's nonprofit or not-for-profit that basically mean the same thing. New Jersey, the state of New Jersey, uses the term nonprofit as a designation for an incorporated entity with charitable purposes. So it may vary in other states, but in New Jersey, nonprofit means this, well, I shouldn't say charitable, I'm sorry, for public benefit, because there are a variety of different classifications of nonprofits. Tax exempt is the term used by the IRS, and it means you're exempt from federal income tax. Okay? And that, of course, is part of what supports the nonprofit sector, that their resources go into their mission. There are many, many different categories of tax-exempt organizations. There's 501c1 through 27, and then there are a bunch of other categories, which I have to go look them up, okay? But they can be trade associations, they can be fraternities, condo groups, or HOAs and social clubs. There's a wide variety, cemeteries, there's a whole bunch of different categories. But it is the 501c3 is the classification for charitable nonprofits. And so the purposes of the organization have to meet the IRS standards for charitable organizations, educational, literary, religious, scientific, variety of other classifications. Anything usually to do with youth can often be classified as charitable. There's also the 501c4s. These are civic leagues or social welfare organizations, but they can do some lobbying. Okay, so while 501c3s are, their donations are tax deductible, they're eligible for a sales tax exemption, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. They're eligible for nonprofit mailing rates, but they have strong limits on lobbying, and partisan political activity is strictly prohibited. You cannot endorse a candidate. You cannot have a discussion or a debate on a political issue that doesn't have balance. If you've got a person representing one perspective, you need to make sure there's somebody representing a different perspective, and that you're not taking a side in this. So you can advocate for policies, you can advocate for actions, but not for individual candidates, and not in a partisan way. Sometimes 501c3s will create a 501c4. For example, the League of Women Voters. The league itself is a 501c4 because they're out there advocating for policies that support citizenship, voting, these types of things. The 501c3 is their foundation. And that is a charitable organization. They do their education programs for the public. Another little piece of terminology here is conflict of interest. And I'm going to let Willie jump in here because he's knowledgeable about this and brought up some points when we were talking that I think we need to share with you.
Thanks so much, Debbie. Yes, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you, Nancy, again for having us. And as Debbie had mentioned, with the conflict of interest, there's a document that actually comes from the IRS that what it basically indicates. So let's say, for instance, if you have 7 members on your board, but 3 of them are related, then you need to have the other 4 persons should not be directly related. And another example, being they want to avoid what they call, again, using the terminology, conflict of interest. So also that, let's say, for instance, one of the board members owns a property wherein the entity wants to lease space from, it's okay. It's just that that person have to abstain or withhold rather from voting on that issue. And this document pretty much lays out everything, uses like a 3-pager, and it lays out, and then the board must verify the decisions, as it states here, do not benefit any board, staff, or stakeholder. So with that, Nancy, Debbie, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. That's very important to understand. It's required to have this in your bylaws, but it's very important for you to understand what it really means. Just a little bit of information about New Jersey nonprofits in general, and this is where the center does do some research for you, is there are over 40,000 501c3 organizations. Okay, there, when you look at all the nonprofits, including those, the 501c1s versus 27, I think it's closer to 55,000, but the majority of them are charitable nonprofits. We employ 330,000 employees. We're 9.6% of the state workforce, almost 10%. We account for 50 billion in expenditures annually in the state. And the thing about nonprofits is very often they are employing people who live in the same area, in the same town, or not too far away. So the money that's nonprofits are spending very often is supporting the local economy. Also, there are 108 million volunteers in New Jersey, providing what could be valued at over $5 billion in service and in-kind service. And again, those are things that really do make a difference, and we can take pride in that. So how do I start a nonprofit in New Jersey? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to do some thinking. I've got some reasons here that are beneficial, that are, positive things for creating, starting a new organization. Okay, you have a program or a service that supports the public or community interest. You want the contributions to be, the support you get to be tax deductible. Many private foundations and grants come with a restriction that they can only be given to 501c3s. You have limited personal liability. Once you incorporate, individuals acting on behalf of the group have a level of protection in the state of New Jersey and in most states once you're incorporated. The nonprofit postal rates are available to you. Sales tax exemption can be available to you, and exemption from income tax through the IRS. Okay, why not to become a 501c3? Well, you lose your autonomy. Remember, a nonprofit is a public trust. You don't have, there's no owner, there's no one person who can take control. Your funds must be used for exempt purposes only. They cannot benefit any private interests. That's when Willie was talking about the conflicts of interest. reporting and filing requirements are there. You have to monitor expenses. You have to document things. There's administrative costs and time required. And also there are limits on your lobbying activities. You also need to demonstrate sustained public support as a public charity. There are other forms, there are family foundations and private foundations. That's not true, but you have to learn about, how they're set up. They're a little different. You can have difficulty sustaining an organization over the long term. Okay, this is a great idea and everybody's all enthused, and 3 years in, somebody's had to move and somebody else has had some other influence in their life and they've gone another direction. Also, you're competing for limited funds. Okay, there's, there are other groups perhaps doing similar things, and you need to demonstrate that what you're doing is really worth supporting. And finally, you may be duplicating what other organizations are doing if you're not careful about coordinating and finding out where you fit in. There are some alternatives to starting your own organization. You can approach an existing program or organization and say, hey, I want to add on this, what I'm really good at. Okay, I'm really good at massage therapy, and this is a cancer clinic. I could come and I could be doing massage and doing some education, body education for your patients, and you could. Therefore, you're supplementing what is already existing, but you don't have to create a separate organization. You can also start a local chapter of a national or regional organization, and then you have the support of the organization. They've done this before. They know, they have policies and resources available to you. Finally, if you need to have control over the organization, if you want to be the one who decides what happens and what doesn't happen, you can create a for-profit organization. You can be doing good things even though you're a for-profit. That's allowed. Okay. You can also maintain an informal organization, which is unincorporated organization, and that flies kind of under the radar screen. You have to be very small. You have to have, in New Jersey, you have to have an annual operating budget of less than gross receipts of less than $5,000 a year. There are, friends of the library. There are, groups that work in hospitals with children. There are people who do a lot of different things that have very, very small budgets. And so they don't need to be incorporated as an 501c3 or incorporated in the state. The other thing you can do is find a fiscal sponsor. There are foundations, there are funds, there are larger organizations in the same field that may be willing to say, okay, our 501c3, you can come under our umbrella. They have to handle the finances, okay, but they can do that for you and you benefit from their tax exempt status. So there are things to look at and explore. Remember, a nonprofit is not simple. It's the same as starting a business, but there are additional requirements and restrictions that a for-profit business does not have. So don't be fooled into thinking, oh, this is going to be easy. The ED, the CEO, be it paid or volunteer, is overseen by the board and stakeholders. So just like any other employee, you're not guaranteed your position. It is up to the board to make final decisions about the staffing and the allocation of funds, etc. Also, remember that founder is not a legal status. Okay, I'm the founder, fine. But that does not give you legal status, at least in the state of New Jersey. So I'm going to turn you back over to Willie here on the resources, the research and planning and preparation that needs to be done as you begin to form a nonprofit, once you've decided that that's the way you want to go.
Yes, thanks so much, Nancy. Debbie, I got Nancy right there. She does such a phenomenal job in facilitating. But here's some of the sources like forming nonprofit. There's a resource page where you go to see the links here, NewJerseyNonprofits.org, forming a nonprofit. Also, the Division of Taxation has New Jersey questions and answers about starting. And then there's a pro bono partnership with starting nonprofit ups and downs and alternatives. Now, I will say with the pro bono, they will give you limited legal advice. It's not what we call a deep dive into it, but they will give you some guidance, which is important. And you may also want to talk to them about possibly having somebody on your board that's familiar with legal services as well. And as Debbie had indicated, when you're looking at forming a nonprofit, I like to ask several questions when I'm consulting. Is first of all, what's your mission? Why do you want to do this? Like I've had clients that wanted to set up a family foundation, and like here's the governance structure. And as Debbie indicated, maybe what you're considering could be a hobby. It's not necessarily a full functioning. And as we indicated earlier, you can't form a nonprofit for private enrollment. In other words, yeah, I'm gonna set this up, I'm gonna go get some grants, and then I'm gonna build me a house and buy me nice cars. Woo, that's a red flag. So you want to make certain. So some additional sources, IRS, great nonprofits, New Jersey Charities Registration. Once your entity is established, you receive your letter from the Internal Revenue, you then is recommended that you also file an application with New Jersey Charities Registration so you could be on their list, because some of the funders will check out to see if your organization is legit. And then Network for Good and GuideStar are definitely some good places to be, because there you might have some funders or individuals. You might have some wealthy individuals say, you know what, I want to give some money this time of the year or at the end of the year. They go on Networks for Good, see who's a legitimate organization that fits within their mission profile, and boom, next thing you know, you got $500,000, $1 million. I don't like to encourage people. So that's what we want to talk about when it comes to forming a nonprofit. Thanks, Deb.
Okay, the other thing too is in terms of developing your planning for the nonprofit is going to these resources to learn about what's in your community, what are different organizations doing, okay? And those resources that Willie was talking about can be places for you to go to get information, but also a lot of communities have different groupings or meetings or councils. A lot of cities and counties have human services or youth or health councils that may meet monthly or quarterly. And if you can go to those meetings, you'll get to meet other organizations in your same field or doing similar services. The New Jersey Office of Faith-Based Initiatives also has resources, including some funding in small quantities for nonprofit organizations that are small and community-based. And it's not, you don't have to be just faith-based, you can be community-based too. And they do training and provide a lot of guidance. And again, can connect you with other organizations. There's also the Community Networking Association of New Jersey, and various counties in New Jersey have chapters, and they meet once a month. They have a Zoom meeting, and now I think they are going to be going back to in-person meetings. But the whole purpose of it is to bring the nonprofits in the region together to talk about what they do, what their needs are, what resources, share resources, and support each other and learn together. Also, don't forget the chambers of commerce, because some of them have nonprofit committees. Some of them have, most of them will have some nonprofit members, and that's another way of making a connection with both the business community and the nonprofit community in your area. So if you're going to form a nonprofit, you need to do some planning and some preparations. Okay, business plan, absolutely essential. Know what you're getting into. Work out your plan before you get started. Otherwise, you're in for a lot of struggle and a lot of frustration. SCORE is fantastic. We refer people to SCORE all the time because they have a course and they walk you through building up your business plan. And there are a lot of questions on a business plan that are really kind of, you need help focusing and really clarifying what you think you can and can't do. Laeta in Camden, Eiffel in Newark, there are other organizations who also help with that, and support entrepreneurial ventures, et cetera, both for profit and nonprofit. So look and see what's out there to help you with that. SCORE also provides mentoring, both in the business planning project, but also as you're going along. The mentors in SCORE are very helpful. And again, there may be somebody in the same field whom you admire or who has been helpful to you. Go to that person and say, hey, would you mind just touching base with me, once a month or something like that? Or can I give you a call if I've got some kind of sticky problem? And most people are really pleased to be asked to do that. And it benefits them as well as you. So, don't think you're just, taking from them. But it's very, very important. And people will often say how much their mentoring relationships what a difference they made in their success. Okay, now name search. Before you get started, you want to search for the name you have in mind and see if there is an organization with the same name in New Jersey. You cannot use it. The other thing you may want to do, though, is check nationally, okay? Because sometimes you'll start an organization and 5 years later, somebody comes in and say, hey, I've had that name for 20 years and I'm in, Arkansas, okay? But that's something that you may want to take care of. I said legally, you just have to make sure there isn't one in New Jersey. Now, to form a bank account, and this may come up sooner or it may come up later, but one of the things that we found is that people will go to the bank to open an account, and they tell them, oh, you have to have A, B, C, and D, because that's what for-profit businesses have to have. You only need an EIN, okay, the employer identification number, which you get from the IRS, and to open the bank account for the organization, you're going to have two people signing. But when you get there, the tellers may not know this. They may, not have been given enough instruction. So if you're told you can't do it, just ask for a manager. You'll find that, somebody up the line knows what's going on. So those are some of the little, tricky, another one of those tricky things. But in your planning, you want to consider all kinds of different things. Again, I'm going to ask Willie to jump in here about some of these various broad aspects of planning.
Sure, thanks. And also one other point too, Debbie, you brought out on that name search. I found that a lot of times people, they so excited about starting a nonprofit, they go and get the EIN and then come to find out there's a conflict with another name in that state. And it's like, oh my God. So they add another step in the process because you got to write to IRS saying I need to change. And it's a whole big thing. So take what Debbie just stated very seriously. So as we look at consideration for when you're doing your nonprofit, diverse revenue streams, as Debbie mentioned earlier, you may become a line item on another entity's budget. So wherein you provide, let's say, tutoring, things of that nature, they get a grant, you could facilitate that piece of the grant. That's a revenue. Another entity, you may do computer training. That's another revenue stream that you can have. A volunteer recruitment plan. As those businesses and Chamber of Commerce's, you may have some people there that may want to volunteer with your nonprofit advocacy. Well, the number one pros, as far as I'm concerned, is the Center for Nonprofits. They are pros when it comes. I mean, you're going to get the emails, letters, and the thing about it, I love it, and you appreciate this as a nonprofit, especially one just forming. They literally create the template for the emails that you need to send your senators, your congresspeople, things of that nature. Then outreach. there are people in your local community that may say, whoa, we didn't realize you were here. We want to help out. This is what we got. We want to do collaborations. Right now, a lot of the funders are looking for collaborations. They're not looking for, oh, we're the only ones that's doing this. No, they're looking at how can you optimize the dollars that we want to provide. Then financial systems, service delivery, what's your outgoes, your income, your measurables. How are you going to measure what it is that you do? For instance, if you did coats in the wintertime, socks in the wintertime, one group we work with, they gave out over 10,000 pairs of socks. So this is important, and that's also can be viewed as in-kind service. So these are just some of the ways that you may want to look at for consideration. Back to you, Debbie.
Okay, great. Thank you. One more thing. There's a lot of talk these days about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and belonging, and justice, and all of that. The center has made a commitment to work with the nonprofit sector to look at where we are. Are we talk the talk? Are we walking the walk? So we have done the second survey of New Jersey nonprofits. And this is where we are at this point. Okay, we have staff of our organizations is about 2/3 white and 1/3 Black, or I'm sorry, BIPOC, not any other ethnicity or race. Then we have boards, which are 29% to 71%, a little bit less diverse. But when we come to CEOs, it's dramatic. On the left, you can see that 85% of CEOs are white. And this does not represent the community that we serve by and large. And it's important that there be that diversity and that representation and direction so that people are aware of the communities they're working in and being given good guidance and insight into the needs and the opportunities that these communities might have that might not be apparent to somebody from coming from a different perspective. All right, we're going to talk about incorporation here. Okay, this is here's the meat of the subject. Okay, and again, I'm going to let Willie kind of do some of this so that we can move. He's very familiar with this whole process.
Yes, so thanks, Debbie. So what happens here when you're structuring your incorporation, one is, and Debbie is going to show you what the portal on the New Jersey state looks like. But right here, as you see, a minimum 3 board members. You will probably need more over time, but right now you can start with 3. So sometimes the question is asked, can I use my spouse? Can I use my children? At least they're 18 years or older. But remember earlier, I stated that to avoid conflict of interest, let's say you want to buy computers, and it's not, as they say, for private enrollment. In other words, wherein who's going to benefit? Is this like viewed as a cash cow, wherein, whoa, we get these grants while we're going on cruises and all that? No, so you want to make sure it's structured. The next thing is determine your organization needs. Burden often falls on one person, but must keep the board members involved and throughout the process. And this is something very key. You're not looking for what I call resume builders, where they just, yeah, my name is on the board, I'm over the board here, but they're not active. Place those type of individuals we normally recommend, put them on what we call an advisory board, which cannot vote, but they can give advice. But the people who you really want on your board to be active and also make sure that they have the mission at heart of what it is that the goal of your particular organization. And then resources, supplies, space. You may decide, do you want to have a membership subscription as part of support or not? That's totally up to you. And then space. Maybe you can use the basement of a church. Maybe there's another business that say, hey, we got a room over here. We can let you use it. There's a lot of ways that you can minimize your overhead, just sometimes by putting out the help sign, and just going from there. And then articles of incorporation, I'm just gonna share my screen to pull up one, yes, right here. I'm gonna show you just a over sample copy as it here states, if you could see my screen, it says name of the corporation. The corporation was formed in this case, at what the address in the state of New Jersey. What is your purpose? And this is something that's very key. Normally, when you are forming your entity, you want to make certain that what happens if the entity decides to dissolve. So you need to have what they call the purpose. You also need to have in the IRS guidelines, furthermore, no director, officer, member shall be entitled to share in the distribution of any of the corporate assets upon dissolution. This is what they call the IRS dissolution clause. And reason why this is so important, again, it goes back to if, let's say you got $100,000 in your financial cupboard, and for some reason decides we no longer want to do this. Well, once you pay your expenses, let's say you got $50,000 remaining, you can't divvy it up to the board members. It has to go, the IRS states this very clearly, it has to go to another nonprofit. I just had that happen to another nonprofit that did dissolve their entities. And what they did was their accountant who knew the rules, they decided which organizations they wanted it to go to. But this is something very key because you don't want your Uncle Sam or cousin Iris stopping at your house. I turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you. We need to kind of move along here too. There's a lot here, so we're trying to skip over get to the main points. The articles of incorporation will be filed with the state, and they can only be modified by a board action and then refiling with the state and the IRS. So you want to keep the overall goals of the articles of incorporation very broad to allow for changes that may come up in the community, if you expand, if there's a pandemic, okay? So you want to make sure that you allow yourself quite a bit of latitude. Now, there's a lot of resources for your articles of incorporation. IRS publication 557 is where you need to start. And the center has a publication called Title 15A Revisited. I'm going to be sharing that with you after this webinar. And it gives you a summary of the New Jersey statute, Title 15A, that governs charitable nonprofits. Okay, this is the Bible of the legal Bible of charities. So you're going to use that to create the articles of incorporation and bylaws. And what it does is it gives you, in summary, the key points so that you can refer to it and not have to read this many pages long document of legalese. Obviously, you have to make sure that it's together with that. But again, you can, this will get you a long ways on your way. The other thing you need to be aware of before you file is you're going to need your NAICS number. That's the North American Industry Classification System. I have to write that down because I can never remember it. But this is a number you'll need to use keyword when you go into the website. You'll use keywords to narrow down your search, and then you'll get a kind of an overall code, a short code, and then you'll click through to see more specific descriptions that get closer to what you are. Don't go bananas with this, okay? Get what seems the closest, and you're probably gonna be fine. The cost of incorporating, there's a $75 fee, and that's the nonprofit rate. We recommend that you spend the $15 to expedite it for quick processing. And used to be you had to pay for the copies, but now you can get copies online at no charge, which you want to make sure you have multiple copies. Think about where you need to submit them. I'm going to show you very quickly. We're going to walk through the New Jersey Division of Revenue Enterprise Services, which they've shortened to DORIES. And this is the web page you're going to go to, okay? And you're going to click on New Business Filings, okay, right here. Later on, you may want to go to business records and information if you need to get a certificate of, your incorporation or of documents related to the organization. You can go there, and then every year you'll be filing your annual report here. So this is a web page that you'll be going, back and forth to. You are going to click on the business information, and then you're going to get that start registration page. And you register as a business entity. It doesn't say nonprofits, okay? You are, and what I said before, you are a business. So you're going to go there. And then as you see on the left, that says business information, registered agent, board of trustees, other provisions, you're going to be just going down that series and answering these questions. So I kind of threw in this Debbie Duncan Foundation, which of course does not exist, but I'm filing as a New Jersey domestic nonprofit corporation. There's many, many categories there, but find the one that's going to be most commonly what you're going to choose, for a nonprofit. Registered agent. The registered agent may be an individual or corporation duly registered, okay? But there has to be a street address, okay? And that person is guaranteeing that any information received from the state, from the federal government, official information for that organization will make sure that that gets into the right hands, to the board, so that it gets addressed. You don't want people saying, oh, gee, I never got anything. A year ago, we sent you a notice that your, tax exempt status was being revoked. That's not an excuse. You have to have, there has to be somebody that's responsible for making sure you get that information. And especially with smaller, if you're big and you have a building, it's not a big problem. But when you're a smaller organization, you have to make sure that that's updated. Okay. Then you will have chosen, you're going to start entering your board of trustees. Okay, and we just said you have to have 3 trustees, but you'll get those entered. And then, are there any other provisions? Are you going to be a membership organization? How are you electing trustees? How are you distributing assets? Where is that? Where can we find out what you've set up? So that's the incorporation process. Willie referred to the bylaws, which you will develop along with those articles of incorporation, because the articles of incorporation are going to be the overarching goals. And then you're going to have the details. The bylaws are really the details of running that organization. You'll need some, this will be your guidance for governance, and it can be amended by the board as needed. The board can make changes. So start off and know that, in 3 months, if you say, boy, this just isn't working, the way we set up voting or whatever, you can go back and you can change that. If it's in your articles of incorporation, it's, a more detailed process. Remember with the bylaws that no one size fits all. What will work best for your organization, the circumstances in which you find yourselves, and the needs of and abilities of the board that you have. With nonprofits, unlike for-profits, you cannot submit the bylaws with your incorporation documents. That's because you're not legally incorporated as a nonprofit. The board, you don't have a CEO or an ED or whatever. The board has to be the body who acts on it as a legal entity, which is only after incorporation. So you're going to have a first board meeting, and then you're going to vote on the bylaws and submit it to the state. Then you're going to have you'll get a letter of determination saying, yes, we've granted you nonprofit status in the state of New Jersey. Now you may want to apply for state sales tax exemption. You may also want to register with New Jersey Charities Registration if you expect to raise $10,000 or more in the next year. You'll want to do that. If you're planning on having any fundraisers like the raffles and bingo or tricky trays or whatever, You need to register with the New Jersey Games of Chance. And it's important to realize that. People think, oh, it's no big deal, okay? You need to register. You register for 2 years, and then you get you need to go for each event. You have to go to your local community, your local, city clerk or whatever, to get that approved. That's usually rubber stamp. It's not much of a, it's not hard to do, and it's done fairly quickly. But you need to know that that's there. Now, Willie's going to show you an example of the application for state tax exemption.
Yes, good good afternoon, everybody. Again, yes, if I can share this here. Yep, here we go. So with the ST5 form, yes. All right. On the ST5, basically what it is, it shows what I have on here. What it does, it just basically shows how to once you get your letter from the IRS, that's what I want to say. Here it is. Once you get your letter from the IRS, you fill in an application for sales tax exemption. Now, it used to be that when you filed it, within 2 weeks you get it. The time, because of the pandemic, the workforce flow is kind of expanded, but it looks like this. You're just putting your EIN, the legal name of your entity, with your county and other information. In this case, you would check off corporation, even though you're a nonprofit, you check off and then attach a copy of your incorporation document. That's your forming document. Who's on your board will go here, and then you just check off a 501 right here. C3 form and organized exclusively for charitable, scientific, literary, educational, prevention of children, animals. That's that, or you could use other, whatever your particular, but most nonprofit organizations will fit in this #1 category. So this is what they call the ST5. This is when you're going to go to Home Depot, Staples. You can file this with them, and then when you're making purchases, you won't have to pay the sales tax. So with that, Debbie, I'll turn it back.
All right. Let's come back here. Okay. All right, so now we're talking about the IRS exempt application, where, again, publication 557 is going to be your starting point. Remember not to submit original documents. You will not get them back. So you want to make sure that you have copies certified if they need to be, but make sure that you keep your original documents. And that's another thing to be aware of. You need to keep these records. These organizational records need to be safely filed, and they need to pass from board to board or staff to staff, or whoever has them. They need to make sure that they're kept up, that things like minutes and other records and activities are documented and get passed on from one authority to the next as people change. This is one thing that a lot of organizations get caught up in. Oh, well, the treasurer didn't do this, or didn't tell us where the documents were, or whatever. And you got to really make sure that doesn't happen. When you file with the IRS, you can file either Form 1023 or 1023-EZ. If your gross receipts are under $50,000, if your total assets are under $250,000, which applies to an awful lot of startups, you can use the Form EZ. Some organizations will choose to file Form 1023, the long version, because it offers more specific detail. And when people are going to places like, GuideStar, or looking in the IRS records or whatever, they can learn more about your organization and how you're run, and things that may influence, say, a donor, or somebody who's considering getting involved, supporting your organization. To submit the IRS exempt application, you need to have these documents: an EIN, the Articles of Incorporation, your bylaws approved by the board. You'll have to have a description of the activities that you're planning on engaging in to further your mission. And you will need financial records, financial information. And again, don't submit the original documents. Again, I'm going to have Willie jump in because another thing you're going to need, I mentioned the NAICS number before, but you're also going to need your NTEE classification on the federal level.
Yes, I'll just kind of hit this, give you a high level overview. But again, if you like more information, you will get a copy of this. And so we're done. Just as Debbie has stated earlier, you see the classification, find out which one is closer to you, and then you'll get like a P20, 833, whatever, and you see this list here. So with that, I'm just going to conclude it, that segment. We're done.
Okay, you're going to expect 6 to 9 months for completion. The IRS has gotten some more funding lately. Their budgets had been cut drastically, but they are getting more people in. And so we're hoping that that time may shorten a little bit. When you submit it, and this was, this was really suggestions, is remember to avoid holidays or the fiscal year ending months, which are, May, June, and November, December. The volume there is going to be a lot higher for the demands on the workforce. So if you file, in March, that may make a lot more sense, or September. You can also look on the IRS website, and it will tell you where your application is in the process using this link. And again, we're going to be sending you information with all of these links when we send the follow-up. When are donations tax deductible? This is very critical that you understand this clearly. Until you have your exempt certificate from the IRS, donations are not tax deductible. People may want to give you the money anyway. Most people are not giving it just so that because it's tax deductible, but you need to make sure that you're communicating with people. You're letting people know that this donation is not tax deductible now. It is pending approval from the IRS. Okay, now, when the IRS approves your tax exempt status, usually if you file within 27 months of your state incorporation date, okay, they will backdate the period of deductibility to the date of your incorporation, so that you may have donations that you've gotten over 8 or 10 months. Okay, those donations will now be tax deductible. So, but you've got to make sure you're telling people that they can't be guaranteed that until you get the approval. There are a lot of resources at the IRS to help you run your organization effectively and legally. There is a course called the Small to Mid-Sized Tax Exempt Organization Workshop. It is 10 sessions. It's an in-depth course. I highly, highly recommend this for board members and for higher level staff. Okay, it goes over all the steps of running the organization, what the IRS requires, what it doesn't, and really covers everything. You really need to know this information so that you are confident of running your organization correctly, and then also pass along to new incoming board members and directors. There's also a site called Stay Exempt. And this is an IRS website with a lot of little videos and short instructions. How do I handle this? How do I handle that? But it's very helpful, and can be very useful to people who are doing any of the different processes involved with documenting and running the organization. I also suggest that you sign up you can just sign up for the newsletter, which is called EO Update, meaning Exempt Organizations Update, and get information updates from the IRS directly in terms of steps that are coming along down the pike or any changes that are being made. and reminders about deadlines, etc. Finally, I just want to make sure you do realize that advocacy is an important part of any nonprofit's work. Okay, we want to ensure that nonprofits have a seat at the table. We want to help simplify processes. We are One of the things the center is working on is to pass a charitable giving incentive in New Jersey. Okay, you could get you can get deductions on your federal income tax if you give over a certain amount, but not on the state level. And we really think that that should be instituted. It will motivate people, reward people for being charitable. Also, voting. Okay, very important for nonprofits to help provide access to educate about what voting rights are, about what citizenship requirements are, etc., and encourage people to exercise that vote.
Yeah, Debbie, we're getting
Yeah.
with the hours, so we need to move through these sections quickly.
Okay.
And I want to
All right.
remind everybody, you will get these slides and resource documents,
Right.
so you will have this information at your fingertips.
Yeah. Okay. Very quickly, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but just funding is about building relationships, especially when you're getting started. You're not going to walk up to a foundation. They're not going to give you $20,000. Okay. You really need to build relationships. Who benefits from your services directly? Okay. If you have a youth serving program, I used to oversee a urban after school program for teenagers. Okay. All of the businesses in that neighborhood benefited from these young people having something productive to do in the hours from 3 to 6, because they didn't have to deal with, kids sitting on the corner listening to their radios blaring, whatever. There are millions of ways that people that you don't think about benefit from the services that you're doing, who are in a position to provide some funding. And even if it's $50 a year, again, if you work with the community, it's going to make a difference. Cultivation is essential with funding. You've got to continue providing attention and communicating with people who support you. And then, of course, community events can be fundraising, but they also connect you with the community and with building friendships. Get to know your local business leaders, your government officials and representatives, very, very important. Connect with them, community leaders, and then be a part of the nonprofit community. And don't forget, you can get in-kind support. Businesses, community groups, there are people in your community who have skills that you can use. And there are educational institutions, the schools, etc., can provide space or equipment or expertise. Everybody is affected by nonprofits in some way or another, so don't stop. I wanted to share with you too. This is a chart on board involvement in fundraising. Not everybody can go ask for money. There are different levels, and you want to look at your board accurately and say, hey, this person is going to be really good at calling our donors after the fact and say, hey, thank you so much for donating, but they're not going to be able to go in there and ask for money. And look at what each person can do well and what they're comfortable with. There are many grant resources. Okay, so you can come to the center's funding opportunities page. Candid, the Foundation Center, is an excellent source for grant research, and they have the Funding Information Network with free access to anybody in the community in 8 different locations in New Jersey. So that's a tremendous benefit. They also have a librarian there who can help you with this. There are state financing incentives and a whole variety of subscription services that can connect you with grants that you're involved with. We don't have any questions at the moment, so I'm going to quickly move on. And I just want to talk about a couple of things here. Some of the changes that are happening in the nonprofit sector, and one of them is really adapting to the changes that COVID pandemic has brought on, but also in terms of equality and leading with our values. The New Jersey Center for Nonprofits and the Council of New Jersey Grantmakers have been working together for a number of years. We're looking at the relationships between funders and nonprofits and trying to really make those partnerships so that there's a working together and less of a power dynamic of I'm giving you money, therefore, you have to do what I tell you. So that's something that is going on. And we each have conferences and events throughout the year. The Council of New Jersey Grantmakers Conference is coming up this May 23rd, and it's always an excellent, excellent thing. I mentioned research, the New Jersey Nonprofits Trends and Outlook. We have annual reports. They're available on our website. These can be useful for grant applications and community education. Also, anybody who's on this webinar who attended can use the discount code RABBIT in the next 30 days when you go to the center website to become a member, and you will get a 10% savings on the annual dues. And reach out to us. We can give you more information about what membership entails. We also have an events page with different educational programs, both ours and other people's. And then, as I said, we have a variety of membership benefits, but I want to make sure that you have the contact information for Willie. And on this slide, and then I've got my contact information here. And I want to thank you all very much for participating today. And please feel free to contact us with additional questions and in any way that we can help you. I want to thank Nancy very much for the partnership with SCORE for doing this. It's been a learning experience and also something that we can continue to go forward with and develop more of. So I really appreciate it, and I truly value the work that SCORE does for the nonprofit, well, for all of our communities, but also the nonprofit community specifically. And I want to thank Willie. You were very helpful in this and have brought some insight that the person on the ground doing these incorporations has the exposure to.
Thank you.
Yes, Debbie, a great partnership. We really appreciate New Jersey Center for Nonprofits, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. Everybody on the call today, I will be sending out the slides. Debbie and Willie are going to be sending some reference information that'll be included as well. And then the recording will be on our website in about 5 days. And I'll let people know when it's out there. But again, Debbie and Willie, thank you so much for this information. It'll be very helpful for those on the call, but for any people in the future looking to start a nonprofit in New Jersey.